Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm gonna show you how to sew this cute little dress called Gerd. Gerd comes in two different lengths, mini and midi. I'm wearing mini in all my samples. The midi length is around 10 centimeters longer and it will end just above your knee. Apart from that, you can choose between three different sleeve lengths, long, short and 3/4. Gerd is a fake wrap dress with ruching around your waist. I'm sewing this dress using my overlocker as well as my normal sewing machine. If you don't have an overlocker, you can just use your normal sewing machine, but you have to use a small zigzag stitch for the regular seams. Also, I would say that this dress is a beginner-friendly project. It has just very little steps and is totally doable even for beginners. To make this dress, you will of course need fabric, like any knit fabric with a 60% stretch content. How to measure the stretch content will be shown in the next clip. Apart from that, you will need a stretched twin needle for the hem. If you have a cover look, you can of course use that too, or you can just use a small zigzag stitch, but I think the twin needle is a bit nicer than a zigzag stitch. When choosing the perfect fabric for your dress, consider that thin fabrics may reveal your undergarments more than thicker fabrics, but also very thick fabrics might feel uncomfortable because the dress is kind of tight. Apart from the stretch content, make sure that your fabric returns to its original shape after stretching. Especially knit fabrics sometimes lack elastane. They are very stretchy, but when you wear it, they don't fit snugly. They will kind of bulge on your body and that's not pretty. This is how I check the stretch content of my fabrics. I would always recommend to do it because fabrics are very different and it's really hard to guess the stretch content without doing so. First, I pin two pins with a distance of 10 centimeters to my fabric. Then I will hold the first pin along with my measuring tape and then I will pull at the second position and see how far I can stretch it. Try to pull moderately and not extremely. Here I can stretch it to 15 centimeters, which means that this fabric has a stretch content of 50%. With a stretch content of 50%, I'd recommend to size up one size. With 60 to 80 it's perfect, and if your stretch content is more than 80%, I'd recommend to size down 1 to 2 sizes. Let's start with the cutting. Here is an overview of all the pattern pieces that you will need. It is really important that the right and left front pieces are being cut with the right fabric side facing up. Right front piece means that when you wear the dress later, it will be on the right side from your perspective. Also transfer all the markings to the fabric. I used to make little notches that are not longer than half a centimeter, but you can also use tailor's chalk. Now take your right front piece and fold the hem 1 centimeter to the wrong fabric side and pin it in place. Sorry, it's flickering in this clip, but it's luckily just this one clip. This is what it will look like now with the right fabric side facing up. I sometimes add a pin to the right side, not to mix both sides up. And now I'm gonna hem it with half a centimeter of seam allowance and my twin needle. For the start, I always hold the threads tightly and I will set my upper thread tension to a high level and I will stitch with a stitch length of 4. This is what it will look like now, and now we're going to sew the shoulder seams. Therefore, place the back piece with the right fabric side facing up in front of you. Then take your right front piece and place it with right sides together on top of it and pin along the shoulders. Now repeat this step with your left front piece. Just place it with right sides together on top of the back piece and pin across the shoulders. Now stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. I'm using my overlocker. If you don't have one, you can just use a small zigzag stitch instead. So now it will look like this, and now we're gonna hem the neckline. Therefore open your dress up flat so you can see the whole neckline, and then just fold the neckline 1 centimeter to the wrong fabric side and pin it in place. A little side note at this point, I think this way of finishing a neckline is really simple and beginner friendly. That's why I prefer to do that. But if you want to know how to do it, you can of course use a binding. Here instead you just have to cut a binding tape and cut off the 1 centimeter seam allowance along the neckline. This is the neckline right now, and now I'm gonna hem it with my twin needle again. You can also use your cover lock machine if you have one, or a small zigzag stitch, and I'm doing it the same way as I did before. I'm holding the threads to start tightly, and then I'm sewing with a high upper thread tension and with a stitch length of 4. Now we're going to sew the ruching, and therefore we will need 2 gathering stitches right here at the outward curved side of the right front piece. For the gathering stitches, run 2 parallel stitching lines within the seam allowance, which is 1 centimeter. Do not backstitch at the beginning and leave thread tails of approximately 10 centimeters at the beginning and at the end. I'm sewing with the largest stitch length, and once you reach the end, do not backstitch here as well, and leave a 10 centimeter thread tail here too. Now simply repeat these steps and run a second stitching line right next to the first one. This is what your gathering seams will now look like, and now we're gonna sew the side seams. First pin your the short front piece with right sides together to the back piece along the sides, and start at the side without gathering stitches, and you can simply start at the armhole and then pin all the way down. The waist markings will match up, as well as the hem of the right front piece will match up with the marking. Now once this is done, go to the opposite side where the gathering stitches are, and here at the back piece you can find 3 markings. One is the waist marking, and then there is one approximately 7 centimeters above and 5 centimeters below. And now pin the neckline to the topmost marking and the hem of the right front piece to the one which is below your waist marking. And now you can start gently pulling at both upper threads of your gathering stitches, and if you do that, you can see that you are creating gathers. You can pull from both sides and then just pull until the right front piece matches the back piece. And if you want, you can knot the ends to secure it and then just pin everything in place. This is what it will look like now, and now just fold the left front piece downward and pin it to the sides as well. At the side with the gathering, it's simple because you can simply start at the armhole and then just pin all the way down. The waist markings will match up here as well, and in some places you are pinning 3 layers of fabric, and the right front piece is sandwiched between the left front piece and the back piece. And now pin the opposite side to the side seam as well, and here the neckline edge will match up with the topmost marking of the back piece, and the waist markings will match up, and then just pin all the way down. And here as well, the right front piece sandwiched between the back piece and the left front piece. This is what it will look like now, and now it's time to sew the side seams. I'm using my overlocker. If you don't have an overlocker, you can simply use a small zigzag stitch instead. Go slowly to make sure not to cause any gathers. And I'm sewing with my 1 centimeter seam allowance as always. This is the dress right now, and now we're going to sew the sleeves. Therefore, fold them lengthwise with right sides together and pin along the sleeve seams. Next, I place both sleeves mirrored and check if the marking is either at the top or at the bottom of both pieces to make sure that the sleeve pieces are mirrored. And then I'm going to sew the sleeve seam with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I'm using my overlocker here, but you can also use a small zigzag stitch as always. So now these are the sleeves, and now turn the sleeves right side out. Take your dress and leave it with wrong fabric side out. You will find a little notch at the sleeve head. This is the front of the sleeve, and now pull it into the dress and pin the sleeve to the armhole. Match up the sleeve seam with the side seam. There is a marking at the front armhole which will match up with the marking at the sleeve, and at the sleeve head there is a marking too which will match up with your shoulder seam. And then just spread the rest of your fabric equally and pin everything in place. Now repeat this step with the other sleeve as well, and then sew both sleeves into their respective armhole with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. This is what the sleeves will look like now, and now you can turn the dress right side out and you will see that it's almost done. We only have to hem it, and I'd recommend to try it on first and see if you like the length. There are 2 centimeters of hem allowance included. If you want, you can shorten it, and then just fold the hem 2 centimeters to the wrong side at the hem and also at the sleeve hems, and pin everything in place. Now it's time for sewing again, and I'm sewing with my twin needle and a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. As always, I'm holding the threads to start tightly, and I'm stitching with high tension of my upper threads and a stitch length of 4. This is what the final hem will look like, and now you're done. Your dress is finished. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it was helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave a comment or reach out on social media. And if you want to share your make, use the hashtag sewingmachina Gerd so others and me can find it.